We just had GDP revised upward again to 3.3% for the second quarter.
As expected, the economy in the United States is exploding while Mark Carney steers Canada to bankruptcy. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Statistics Canada has released the numbers for the second quarter, and they are not good. We can see that Canada is actually edging closer and closer to economic collapse. And you'll hear people talking now in the mainstream media and the legacy media talking about how there was a recession and they want to blame it on the tariffs. But Mark Carney has already said that the tariffs actually didn't change because there was only things put against the steel industry and everything else has remained the same. This, of course, indicates that there should have been no change in 85% of the industry that was moving out of Canada into the United States. 85% of the products that were going into the United States, that should not have had any impact. And that 85% should have been enough to absorb any of the blows that were going against the economy through the steel and copper industries. However, that's not the situation. In fact, it's quite dire and stark when we look at overall numbers from the GDP right on through. And a lot of times people will throw a number at you, a percentage, and you'll not really grasp what they're talking about. But it's not always one thing. That's the thing, right? They want to simplify it for you. They want to tell you that it's GDP, so it's either good or it's bad. I mean, Philip Champagne was screaming about a 0.5% kick, which, of course, I told you at the time was not correct, and it wasn't. And the numbers tell us things that they are not going to be announcing to you. What they want you to do is somehow blame Donald Trump for the economic collapse that's incoming, not the 11 years of terrible, horrible economic policy of the Liberal government. Now, before I get into the comparison between one economy that's collapsing and one economy that's booming, and they both share a border, let's just look at Mark Carney's track record of saying that he was going to be the one to stop all of this. He said he was going to negotiate a deal. He didn't. He said he was going to find people in Europe that were going to buy our stuff. He didn't. And let's put all that aside. He also said that in 2008, he was the one that saved Canada from economic ruin. So let's put aside all the rest of it. Now he wants Canadians to say, oh, don't worry about it. I just hired a lady for this new office of mine, and she's going to hire 100 people. And by, let's say, January, we're going to be able to announce to the world that we're going to we're going to look at a project. All we got to do is wait 2 years of environmental impact assessments. And then we'll be able to think about putting shovels in the ground. Once they pass those 2 years, we'll probably only take another 6-8 months to find somebody to head up the project. And then, 3 to 5 years, we should be able to get a shovel in the ground. So as we can see, nothing that they say is true. They make a lot of claims, they make a lot of promises, and yet they fall through every single solitary time. There is not one thing that they have ever said they're going to do that they have actually done. And the only time they've done anything at all is at the pressure put on them from the conservative side of the aisle, Pierre Poilievre and the other members of his party making it happen. But otherwise, we had the NDP, we had the Liberals treating us like we were small children, not understanding the simplest of economic issues, not understanding somehow that we don't want to put everything on our credit card, that we want food that's inexpensive, we want gas that's inexpensive. And you can find a different way to clean it up. I shouldn't have to make those sacrifices like the rest of the world is saying. But the Liberal government doesn't seem to think about what is best for you when they make their actions. As we take a look at this, I just want you to bear in mind that there are plenty of corporations and organizations and countries who are prepared and willing to invest in all of the infrastructure projects that we talk about. The only thing that gets in their way is the environmental zealotry of the Liberal Party. It's the ridiculous laws that they pass to try to reshape Canadian democracy into a Marxist centralist government. Let's begin with the numbers released by Canada, because those are the ones that are impacting most of the people listening to the Canadian Shield, and those are the ones that are really bad. So now I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because it's long, but I will leave a link in the description. We don't need to read more than most of the headlines to get a snapshot to get an understanding of what's going on. So this was released on the 29th of August. Real gross domestic product declined by 0.4% in the second quarter of 2025, following a gain of 0.5% in the first quarter. We know that the gain in the first quarter was because companies were importing a lot of stuff and stockpiling. Significant decline in exports of goods as tariffs slow trade with the United States. Exports declined 7.5% in the second quarter after increasing. Here's some of the things that we have to look at. Light trucks plummeted 24.7% in the second quarter. Industrial machinery and parts went down 18%, and travel services went down 11%. Overall, export and imports are down roughly 3% both directions. So when we talk about the fact that the Americans don't want our steel coming in, we can see where the numbers are coming from. We can see that they don't want those cars, and the corporations are on side with it. The corporations are not turning to Trump and telling him, no, just give me a break. The corporations have taken money, billions of dollars. They're building infrastructure. They're building all of the things down there. They're giving people jobs. And so we can see that Mark Carney has not come up with a way to do anything else with our product, because once the Americans said, we don't want your product anymore, Canadian federal government had no imagination and no creativity and absolutely no way of stimulating the economy without relying heavily on Donald Trump and the Americans. And I say that to point to the fact that it was never 51 and that's not going to happen and all that kind of talk. And when you look at the economic reliance we have on that country, you have to ask yourself, when did it not happen? Now, I'm a proud Canadian. Believe me, I'm a true patriot. But I am also realistic. If you tell me that one country no longer taking our product has put us to the brink of bankruptcy, then we have to ask ourselves, are we really that far apart? Or is Donald Trump correct when he labels it 51? Here are the 4 indicators that we can look at from this report that tell us that everything is going wrong. Growth in wages slows to the lowest rate since 2016, aside from 2020. It's funny that we will allow wages to slow, and yet we still demand that inflation be held between that 2 and 3%. Because there are people that make money on that 2 and 3%. And there are at least, I would say more than half the country doesn't get a cost of living increase. Nonetheless, they want it to make you think now that if you get a wage increase, it's going to offset the amount of money you're paying at the grocery store, at the pumps, or for your land, or for where to live, or for your electricity. And it really doesn't. By putting up wages, we actually drive up the cost of everything else. What we have to do is bring down the cost of essentials. Bring down the cost of essentials. Yeah, that'll make a lot of bankers go pretty upset, but the rest of us will do fine. And we have to ask ourselves, what's more important? Household savings fall as incomes weaken. So now not only are people paying more out, they're putting more money on their credit card. Canada has more money on credit right now than our entire GDP. Like we owe more money than we have. And that's just like the household spending debt, they call it. It's everybody's credit cards are maxed. Everybody's put second mortgages on their houses. It is a bad situation when you have to buy your groceries. Even though you're working full time, you have to buy your groceries on a credit card. Corporate surplus falls as energy sector lowers incomes. So what that means is they're not spending as much money. All of these are signs of a struggling economy, and they know that. That's why you hear them saying the word recession. But we have been in recession. They redefined the word recession. The Liberal Party redefined the word recession a couple of years back. But there has been no quarter in the last, I think it's 11, that there has been anything but negative growth. And negative growth is an indicator of recession. This is the one that really is funny to me. Government net borrowing increases as revenue down following removal of the carbon tax. So they tell you that the carbon tax they weren't making any money off of it. And yet when they removed the carbon tax, their net borrowing increases as a result. So they were taking your money. They were doing something with it. Maybe they were just living off the interest. I don't really know. But I can tell you that as a result of not having that in, they had to borrow more money. Now, we'll talk about Mark Carney's $100 billion deficit in a different video. But what you see here is the people on the ground don't have any money to spend, and that will run out. That whatever little bit they do have is running out. And the government is borrowing more and more money to try and maintain the levels that it already has. I mean, the government has tripled in the last 10 years, and the average net salary is like 160 Gs. So there's a lot of money that goes out that they are hoping will come in from these taxes. Of course, if you're not working, you're not making any money to pay taxes, and corporations are not hiring you, and you're moving down into the States, so they're not giving those taxes. And it just goes on and on and on. There's no money coming in. The government is spending all kinds of money. And when you have nothing coming in and you're still spending out, what ultimately happens, of course, is the system snaps, and we call that bankruptcy. We call that you're unable to pay for your loans. And that could happen in a number of ways. But what you really have to ask yourself is, all our dollar has to do is slip a couple of points, and the amount of money that we owe will go skyrocketing. Then the people who are lending us this money will say, no, you're no longer a good investment. We downgrade your credit rating, and you have to start paying us bigger amounts of money every time you pay us back. And in fact, some of our loans we're going to be freezing on you, and we're going to be calling in a few debts to make sure that you don't keep us, that we don't lose any money on you. And that's how it works. It's no different than if the bank lends you money and they say, okay, but if this looks kind of tough for us, so you have to sign out over your house, or that piece of property you own up north that your grandma left you, that kind of stuff. It's the same thing. Now, one of the reasons that the country was so down on Justin Trudeau is because the economy and the jobs losses and the housing prices and the housing scarcity and all that stuff that has yet to change. They got into this love affair with Mark Carney, somehow believing that because he's a banker, he's somehow going to be able to fix the problem through, I don't know what, wizardry, I guess. Nonetheless, he's not able to do it. And obviously, there's only one formula to get out of the problems that we were in. You'll remember that those very same liberals were saying, oh, no, it's bad all over the world, so don't take it out on us. Don't blame us, because everywhere is bad. But not everywhere is bad anymore. And yet, here we are still bad in Canada. Here we are still having these problems in Canada. And by contrast, we can have a look at some of the things that the Americans have to say about their economy, which in comparison is night and day.
Remember, the trade policy is just one pillar of the broader economic policy. When the gas prices are low for consumers, it also means that they're getting lower for our manufacturers and companies that make in America, and that makes us much more competitive. We just had GDP revised upward again to 3.3% for the second quarter. Blue-collar wages are up 1.4% over this time last year. So everything that was intended for this economic policy to get working-class wages up and to get inflation down, all of that's working.
All right, there were a couple of things in there. One was about the court tariffs and how they want you, the Canadian government wants you to believe that somehow they've been overturned. It's funny that they'll say on the one hand that nothing has changed and we get the best deal in the tariffs, but oh, no, look, they're going to be overturned. I hear the legacy media trying to spur everybody on. Those tariffs are not going away. That's just a childish fantasy. Get over it. The Congress is going to have to approve them because they all want to get voted again. And if they try to take away the kind of economic improvements that have happened right now to the everyday, average, ordinary human being on the ground in the United States of America, they're going to be out of a job in a heartbeat. They're no different. Every politicians are all the same. They rely on the support of the people. So the politicians will tell them whatever they want to hear. And the Democratic Party is in single-digit popularity in the United States right now. The last thing they want to do is start interfering with the economy, which, as you heard, has increased 3.3%. 3.3%. Now, if that was the Canadian economy, which is about 16 times smaller than the American economy when I looked a few days ago, we can see that that would actually be 48%, right? Like if we just extrapolate that out. And I don't mean necessarily that we could call it a 48% increase in our economy. What I am wanting you to understand is that it wouldn't be a 3% kick in Canada. It would be an enormous amount of money being generated. It's a 3% kick in the largest economy on the face of the earth, by far the largest. And they increased 3%. Philip Champagne thought we had a 0.5% increase earlier in the first quarter, and he didn't stop talking about it for a week. If we had a 3.3% growth in this country, the Liberal Party would be telling you right now they'd be calling for a new election because they'd be convinced that they were going to get a majority. This is a staggering amount of money when you lay that across the American economy. It's huge amounts of money. Like I say, if we just extrapolate it out at 16 times, a 16th of we're a 16th of their economy. We are talking about people having jobs that haven't had money in years. We are talking about people who had been struggling, who are now being able to put a little bit of money away or able to give a little bit of money to their children's after school programs or, baseball or whatever it happens to be. And don't go telling me that if you're out there listening to me, you know what it's like when you give your kids something they've been wanting and they're happy, you're happy. So why would anybody try to interfere with the level of happiness that's going to be running through the United States of America right now? And I got another point to make on that is these numbers are summer numbers, which can be reflective of a number of things, but there's no harvest in there. There's no spending for coming up for the Christmas holidays. What we can see from that is purely growth of the economy. And we can say, okay, the economy has shrunk, but what you and I have to see is the contrast. Our economy is teetering on the brink. The American economy went up 3.3%, I believe is what he said. And the Liberal government is trying to convince you that it's not their fault. They want you to believe that it has something to do with the tariffs. Well, why are they not generating the economy inside of Canada? If Mark Carney says that we can be all of these things, why are we not starting? Why are we not getting it done? I mean, Trump has only been at it for 6 or 7 months or whatever it is, January to now, and he has improved the economy by that kind of money. How come Mark Carney wants us to wait 2 more years with the environmental impact assessments? How come Mark Carney thinks that we should tighten our belt for 2 more years because it makes his ideology feel better? And why are you and I as Canadians tolerating that? Why are you and I as Canadians not saying, you know what, it's time that the Liberal government take their rules and put them off to the side, and never mind this Bill C5, and never mind you hire in one of your good friends who will drag her feet and try to make everything as slow as possible while the rest of us have no income, and the Brookfields of the world generate billions of dollars off the sweat of the Canadian, off the toil of Canadians. How can we allow that to happen to not only ourselves, but to our children? No matter what walk of life we are from, how can we permit that to just sit idly by while that happens? And then you wonder why it is people are upset, why it is that people that are generating the kind of income and the kind of economy that the Americans can talk about, like in the Manitoba, in the Saskatchewan. I mean, Mark Carney still has done nothing about the canola. So we could see that when you have a federal government that gets out of the way, I mean, all Donald Trump did was say, okay, I'm taking away the environmental rules, I'm lowering the corporate sales tax, and I'm putting on tariffs. And 3.3% within 7 months. So you can see the difference between the two ideologies and how one country is exploding with income and how one country is tightening our belts and are going, we hear our legacy media saying the word recession. All right, I'm going to wrap here. You let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time.